The old prison loomed in the fading light like a monstrous relic from a forgotten nightmare. Its towering stone walls, cracked and weathered by decades of neglect, cast long shadows across the cracked pavement. The air was thick with an unsettling stillness, broken only by the distant call of a lone crow perched high on a rusted guard tower. Jacob stepped out of his car, the gravel crunching beneath his boots, and gazed up at the iron gates that barred the entrance. Rumors swirled around this place, tales of tortured souls trapped behind these walls, restless spirits who refused to move on. Tonight, he was determined to see for himself what lurked inside the infamous prison. As he approached, the heavy gates groaned in protest, rusted hinges squealing like a banshee's scream. Jacob hesitated, feeling a sudden chill crawl down his spine. The sun dipped below the horizon, and shadows deepened, swallowing the courtyard in a creeping darkness. The faintest whisper of wind carried distant echoes, footsteps, murmurs, perhaps a soft weeping, impossible to pinpoint. He pushed the gates open and stepped inside. The air grew colder, stale and heavy, as if the prison itself was breathing, alive with memories of pain and despair. The stone walls were stained with age and neglect, vines clawing through cracks like skeletal fingers reaching out from the past. A sudden clang echoed from deep within the cell blocks, a metal door slamming shut. Jacob's heart pounded. He scanned the corridors stretching endlessly before him, narrow passages lined with rusted bars, empty cells shrouded in darkness. Something flickered in the corner of his eye, a shadow darting just beyond sight. He blinked, but there was nothing. As he ventured further, the temperature dropped sharply, his breath now visible in the freezing air. The silence was broken by faint whispers, almost inaudible, like voices carried on a ghostly breeze. He tried to steady his nerves, reminding himself this was just an abandoned prison, nothing more. But then, behind him, the gates slammed shut with a thunderous boom. Jacob spun around, heart racing. He reached for the latch, but the gates held fast, sealed tight. Trapped. The eerie glow of a flickering overhead light cast trembling shadows on the walls, and from the darkness, a cold presence seemed to watch him, waiting. Tonight, the haunted prison had claimed its newest visitor. The cold air inside the prison seemed to grow heavier with every step Jacob took. The darkness pressed in, thick and suffocating, broken only by the weak glow of his flashlight sweeping across peeling paint and rusted bars. Somewhere deep within the walls, faint whispers began to ripple through the silence, soft, mournful, almost like desperate voices caught between worlds. Jacob's breath caught as a chill raced down his spine. He paused, straining to catch the words carried on the cold breeze, but the voices slipped away like smoke. The shadows along the corridor twisted and flickered, as if alive, shifting into shapes that vanished when he tried to focus on them. Every creak of the floorboards beneath his feet echoed like a warning. The prison's history haunted every inch of the place, tales of inmates who were forgotten, abused, or executed unjustly. As Jacob moved deeper into the labyrinth of cells, he imagined their restless spirits trapped in endless torment, doomed to replay their final moments over and over. A sudden cold gust brushed past him, and he shivered uncontrollably. The flashlight's beam landed on a graffiti-scarred wall, where a faded, desperate message scratched into the plaster read, "Help me." The words seemed to pulse with a ghostly energy, chilling him to the bone. From the darkness behind the bars, a faint silhouette appeared, an indistinct figure, swaying, almost transparent. It was a prisoner, or what remained of one. Jacob froze, heart hammering as the apparition's hollow eyes met his. The figure reached out a trembling hand, then vanished like mist. Panicked but drawn forward, Jacob pressed on. The whispers grew louder, swirling around him in an almost hypnotic rhythm, weaving stories of sorrow, betrayal, and rage. He could almost see the echoes of the past playing out, the clang of the iron doors, the despairing cries in the cells, the footsteps of guards patrolling the endless corridors. Suddenly, the faint glow of a lantern flickered ahead, but no one was there. The silence shattered with a blood-curdling scream echoing through the halls, raw, anguished, and full of torment. Jacob's flashlight flickered violently as he spun around, searching for the source. Only empty cells stared back. His skin prickled with the realization, he was not alone. The spirits of the prison were waking, and they were watching him. Each whisper, each shadow was a warning. The prison's dark past was very much alive, and it wanted him to know. Jacob's heart pounded as the cold iron door slammed shut behind him, locking him inside a small, claustrophobic cell. The faint light from the corridor flickered and faded, leaving him in near total darkness. The only sounds were the soft drip of water echoing somewhere deep in the prison's belly and the pounding of his own frightened breath. The walls seemed to close in, the stale air heavy and suffocating. Shadows pooled in the corners, twisting into grotesque shapes that seemed to move just beyond his line of sight. Jacob forced himself to breathe slowly, trying to silence the rising panic. As minutes stretched into what felt like hours, the silence was shattered by faint noises, scraping, scratching, and soft whispering voices that slithered through the bars like cold fingers. The voices murmured unintelligible words at first, then clearer fragments, pleas for help, curses, warnings. Jacob pressed his hands against the cold wall, fighting the urge to scream. A sudden cold spot engulfed the cell, chilling him to the bone. He shivered violently, teeth chattering as if the prison itself was breathing icy breaths down his neck. The shadows around him flickered and coalesced into vague shapes, faces distorted with sorrow and rage. One form stepped closer, and Jacob could almost feel the weight of its sorrow pressing against his chest. Desperation clawed at him. His flashlight, flickering weakly, suddenly died. He was plunged into pitch darkness. Panic surged, but he clenched his fists, reminding himself this was only a place, a building with a grim history, nothing more. The whispering grew louder, circling him like vultures. He could almost see the prison's dark history unraveling in the blackness, prisoners shackled and beaten, desperate last moments, guards' cruel laughter echoing through these same walls. The energy was suffocating, relentless. Time lost meaning. Every shadow seemed alive with malevolence, every sound a threat. But Jacob knew he had to stay strong, to keep his mind sharp, to find a way out. He began listening closely for any sign of escape, a loose bar, a weak lock, anything. A sudden metallic clang nearby jolted him upright. His eyes adjusted to a faint glimmer, a loose chain hanging from the wall, swaying gently. Hope flickered inside him, fragile but alive. As the night pressed on, the prison's ghosts circled, watching, waiting. Jacob realized this was more than a physical trap, it was a test of will, of courage against the restless spirits determined to keep him there forever. The iron door creaked open with a reluctant groan, and Jacob slipped out of the cell, heart racing but fueled by a sudden surge of hope. The prison's cold corridors stretched endlessly before him, swallowed by shadows and flickering lights. Every step echoed ominously against the cracked concrete floors. But something was wrong. The air thickened with a dark presence, a heavy, suffocating force that pressed down on him, tightening like a noose around his chest. Behind him, faint footsteps echoed, quick and erratic, though no living soul was in sight. Jacob's breath hitched as a cold breeze brushed his neck, and a whisper hissed in his ear, "You can't leave." Panic surged through his veins, and he broke into a run, feet pounding the hallways, desperate to escape the unseen menace closing in. Doors slammed shut around him with deafening clangs, trapping him in winding corridors that seemed to twist and shift with every frantic step. The dim light flickered wildly, plunging him into darkness before sputtering back to life. Shadows danced on the walls, morphing into ghostly figures reaching out with skeletal hands. He turned a corner and froze. There, in the gloom, stood a tall, hooded figure, its face hidden in shadow, but its eyes glowed with a chilling, unnatural light. The entity glided silently toward him, its movements unnatural and fluid, as if gliding over the floor rather than walking. Jacob swallowed hard and sprinted again, his heart pounding in his ears. The ghostly figure gave chase, gaining ground with terrifying speed. Behind him, distant wails and anguished cries rose in a crescendo, as if the entire prison itself was awakening to his presence. He stumbled over debris and broken tiles, panic blurring his vision. Ahead, a rusted stairwell promised escape, but it was a gamble. He leapt toward it, breath ragged, praying it would lead somewhere safe. As he ascended the stairs, the temperature plummeted. Frost formed on the metal railings, and a chilling howl echoed through the shaft. The hooded figure appeared at the bottom, motionless, watching. Jacob reached the top and slammed the heavy metal door shut behind him, barely catching his breath. The footsteps stopped. Silence returned, heavy and oppressive. But Jacob knew, this was far from over. The prison's dark heart was alive, and it was hunting him. The first pale light of dawn seeped through the grimy prison windows, casting long, weak beams across the cold stone floors. Jacob's body was bruised and trembling, exhaustion battling with adrenaline as he stood alone in a shadowed corridor. The haunting silence pressed against him, but he knew this was his last chance. The fragile boundary between night and day might be his only hope to escape the prison's grasp. His breath came in ragged gasps as he moved cautiously toward the massive iron gates that led to freedom. Every step was weighed down by the oppressive sense of being watched, stalked by something unseen yet relentless. The air grew colder still, a frost creeping along the walls, and faint whispers began swirling like a gathering storm. Suddenly, from the darkness ahead, a towering figure emerged, the prison's most feared spirit. Cloaked in tattered prison robes, its face a twisted mask of anguish and fury, eyes burning with ghostly fire. The specter blocked Jacob's path, its voice a bone-chilling growl, "You will never leave." Jacob's heart thundered, but he refused to back down. With trembling hands, he gripped a broken piece of metal from the floor, ready to face the nightmare head-on. The spirit surged forward, a vortex of cold energy and rage. Time slowed. The world narrowed to the struggle between man and ghost. Shadows writhed and screams echoed through the walls, shaking the prison's very foundation. Jacob dodged a swipe of the phantom's clawed hand, feeling the icy chill graze his skin. Summoning every ounce of courage, he lunged forward and slammed the metal shard into the specter's chest. The spirit howled, a sound of pure torment, and began to dissipate, fading into swirling mist that vanished with the first rays of sunlight. The heavy gates creaked open as if released from a centuries-old curse. Jacob stumbled outside, gasping for fresh air, the warmth of dawn bathing his bruised face. The haunted prison stood silent behind him, its dark power broken, at least for now. But as he looked back one last time, he knew deep down the spirits would never truly rest. Their stories were etched into those cold walls forever, waiting for the next soul foolish enough to enter.